Do not begin doing what's explained in this video until you are absolutely sure that your site works perfect. So test every page locally, and then when you're sure that everything's working from all the new HTML requirements of this project to the CSS, upload it onto your server, test it there. You just don't want to move ahead, because if you make mistakes in this part, it's going to be very difficult to troubleshoot if there's other things that should have already been fixed and working fine. So take care of that first. If you're there, then continue on. The next thing that we're going to talk about, and we're just going to, basically brush over the subject, is JavaScript. From here on out in the class, most of the JavaScript will be written for us with the programs that we're going to use. But I want to show you something where you're actually getting into the nitty-gritty of the JavaScript. And usually, if you go to examples like you can find on here, they do something, that's pretty basic, like maybe show you the date and time, or just get something to pop, like this is very typical, that show you the date and time. You can look over here, see what the code is for this. Some demos will just make a pop-up come up on the screen that you have to close. But I want to do something that, since we're talking about CSS, hopefully you'll find a little more interesting, and show you, the power behind what JavaScript can do. It can actually reach into your document and change something. And what I'm going to help you create in this video is two buttons on your home page that will give the user the choice to switch over to the colors that we used during the demo, and then back to your colors. Now, many of you haven't put your colors in yet, and that's fine, and we're going to touch on that as one of the requirements that you need to do here. And just note, all along, as you've been watching or going to my site for reference in this project, my buttons do a different function than what yours will. Mine just simply turn off the CSS and bring it back on. But again, what yours will do, when we view your site, we'll see your colors that you chose, but on the home page we'll have the option to click, and it'll go back to the colors that you've seen me use throughout these videos. On a great demo online, here's the URL for it. It's on the electronic version of the grade sheet for Project 2. And just in case by the time you watch this video, the person, let's say, took this demo down, I still have the code on the grade sheet that you could just copy and paste. That URL takes us to here, and here's where I copied the code from. So let's start doing this in phases. First thing I want you to see is just how buttons work as an HTML element. So we'll just copy everything from this H2 tag down to here. Command C, go into Dreamweaver, and we're going to be putting this on our home page, aka our index page. Now, you're about to make some major changes to the structure of your site, including adding new elements to the local root folder and changing things inside of your main CSS file. So I know I made a separate video on this, but sometimes people forget once they get this far in the semester, so I'm just going to remind you one more time, make some backup copies of the folder. Let me just give you another quick example here. Here is my folder. So this is the one that Dreamweaver is pointing to. So what I'm going to do is just Option, click and drag it, get that plus sign, makes a backup copy of it, and then I can just come in and click, return, get in there, and then just do something like at the very end of this, add BK for backup, and use that sequential numbering. So this file right here, the copy I just made, that is indeed my backup, because Dreamweaver is pointing to this one. So that means if I make a mistake, all I have to do is come back and say, okay, I screwed this up really bad, can't figure out what I did, maybe just delete it, drag it somewhere else if I want to troubleshoot it later, but I just want to get rid of it here. Then I'd go back to this one and just get rid of everything after the word site. Dreamweaver will pick it back up, and I can start working on it from Dreamweaver at that point. Of course, before I do that, I would go ahead and make yet another backup copy because I'm about to go in and write stuff. So again, this is the file that we are going to be writing new information onto. And sorry if sometimes I say file instead of folder, but hopefully you get what I'm pointing at. We've been talking just about a folder that whole time. The assumption is here up until this point your website is working perfectly. Okay, so we copied those buttons. Let's go into our index or home page and let's find a place to paste those buttons in. And I think a good place would be at the end of this section here because you're talking about what you can do with your website. So in Dreamweaver, we'll find just before About Me. Put a return in there. Paste that information in. Clean up the code with a couple clicks of the tab key. And then we'll preview this in the browser. And what you'll see is that the HTML recognizes buttons, and it already made a button for you. And what the button says is what is in between the HTML tags for the button. But then you also write a function in here that says on click. That means when someone clicks the button, do this. Well, we haven't done that yet or talked about that yet. So let's go back out to that person's website and see what else we need to do. So the function, the thing that actually happens, that is the JavaScript. And so right here between these two tags is the JavaScript, and notice that goes in the head of the document because again it's like thinking, like what goes on in our head. And you could put JavaScript on a separate page just like we put CSS on a separate page, but since we're just doing one simple thing, we're just going to put it up in the head of the document. And then we also have to notice one thing here that the person did is that they had to give an ID to the link tag. And remember, we've been using the class code where we would have class equals page style. They used ID because it's unique to the page. It's only used one time. So we're going to go ahead and we're actually going to copy all of this, even though technically we don't need this because we've already done this, right? Told it where our CSS is, but you'll see why I did this, why I'm copying the whole entire thing. So we need to find the head part of our document and paste that in there. And I'm going to go right here so that their link is right below ours. So return, Command V, and then using the tab key, I'll clean that up. If you're following this and you're reading this stuff and you're kind of understanding what this is about to do, then you're way ahead of the game. And you maybe have the right stuff for becoming a coder. If you're thinking, my God, I could never do what Steve just did, copy this, and then have to go in and figure out what I need to change to make this work, don't worry. Maybe this will be the last time you ever actually write JavaScript. Good news is all you have to do is just follow step by step what I do, and it'll work for you. So first thing is we have to change our link so that it's going to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this, Command C, paste it here, and then notice that their stuff in here is like in a different order. They started with relationship and left href at the bottom. They didn't use media equals screen. You know, so that's kind of stuff you're going to run into if you try to do this in the future, like find something from the internet and make it work in your site. Like this is kind of optional. I think I explained earlier that you can also say media equals print, but if you don't have the different things, you may not necessarily, you know, really have to use it. And that's the choice that they made. Everything else is kind of the same. And then, so we don't really need this anymore, but I don't want to just get rid of it, so I'm going to leave it here, but I need to tell the code to ignore it. So again, I would surround it with HTML comments like you see here, and let's just see if this will work for me this time. I know earlier in a demo it didn't, so I have it highlighted. I'm going to click Apply Comment, and then I get a drop down, and it's HTML, so I want HTML comment, and voila, it worked. Now maybe there was a problem before that I did wrong, or maybe it's still not working for CSS, but hey, there you go. I can tell by the color coding now that it is coded out. And you might be asking yourself, why didn't you just replace our link with their link, and the reason is you can see that their CSS page is called default.css, so I would have had to change that anyway, so to me it was easier just to keep what we had here. If you preview this in a browser right now, you can see that the buttons are here and they actually work like buttons, but if we click it on the button, you can see it does something. It actually gets rid of all the CSS. And in short, the reason is because the buttons are trying to work, the JavaScript's up there, it works, but what the buttons are being told to do doesn't make any sense. Like when we click this one, it's going to a CSS page that doesn't exist, and our default is called main CSS. And we'll take care of all that in a bit, but before we do, my suggestion to you is this. Now you want to style your page with the colors that you picked out way back to, I believe it was the very first video in this section. So you probably had those just sitting aside, wondering when you were finally going to get to use your beautiful color choice. Well, here's where you do it. But before you do that, you want to keep mine, because one of these buttons is going to bring up mine away from yours, and then one of the buttons is going to bring it back to yours. Now what you come up with is going to be main CSS. So we need to save what we've been doing together off as a second version. So let's do this. Let's double click. Most of the time I've been telling you just to access main CSS like this, right? But here we are actually going to have to bring it up, double click on it. It's up here. We're going to go File, Save As, and we'll just call this main2 CSS and make sure that that's going into the same styles folder. We'll click Save. When this updates over here, or maybe we'll have to do it manually, we'll see that there are two, and by manually I meant I just click this refresh here. We can see that there are now the two folders in here. Let's make sure, in fact, I like to just close stuff, double click over here to open it back up, because I just really want to make sure I'm on the right one. And then up here where it says document color info with the caps on, I'm going to say class demo, so that if you're ever not sure which one you're working on, that'll be a help. And in fact, what you may want to even do is bring out the main CSS, and then right here write my colors. Now go ahead, do a file, save all. Once again, I know this is kind of a paranoid technique here, but got everything closed. Now what you're going to do is you're going to leave this one alone, and now you are going to spend probably a great deal of time going back in here, replacing this information so that you have easy access to it with your colors. And then you're going to go down one by one every place that CSS is applied and changing it to your colors. Once you have that done, catch up with me on the next video and we'll actually make those buttons work.